Life for children in ancient Rome was not easy, especially if you were born poor. For most kids, life was all about trying to survive. It seems that's still the case for many children today. But did you know that despite the hardships they faced, Roman children also knew how to have fun? They played fun games just like us. When it comes to children, we are always told to play safe. Today, more than ever before, there are so many safety rules for kids. We can't even imagine what it was like hundreds or thousands of years ago. So join us today as we look at some of the most popular games and toys that Roman children used to play. Some of these toys may look simple and innocent, while others will shock you. Roman children sure had some interesting ways of having fun. The Roman Empire lasted for several centuries, and during this time, the empire grew to be massive and wealthy. Life in ancient Rome was great if you were born into a wealthy family. The rich could afford nice houses with beautiful gardens. They could eat tasty foods, and they had access to clean water. Their children could be cared for by slaves. So, while poor families had it tough, life wasn't so bad if you were born into wealth. If you were a rich kid in ancient Rome, you might receive an ornate doll made out of marble. These dolls would be dressed in fine clothes, and would be made in the likeness of a fashionable lady. While dolls are usually considered to be a child's toy, in ancient Rome, dolls were mostly played with by older girls. In a way, these dolls were used as a tool to teach girls how to become a proper Roman woman. Girls would practice putting on makeup and dressing up with their dolls. Some dolls were even said to have movable limbs, which allowed the girls to practice bandaging wounds and other medical procedures. Yes, you heard that right, medical procedures. You see, when a girl reached the age of 12, she would learn how to assist her mother with household medicine. These dolls may have helped them to practice these skills. While it's easy to imagine a child playing with a doll, it's a bit hard to picture kids playing with chariots. Chariots weren't exactly small, and they were definitely not cute, but somehow kids managed to use them as toys. Chariots were pulled by horses and were used to transport people around town or for warfare. But when a chariot wasn't being used for work, it could be used as a toy. Rich children could own their own chariots and use them to race around the city. If you were a kid living in ancient Rome, owning a chariot was the ultimate status symbol. Being able to drive a chariot showed that your family had lots of money, and let's face it, who doesn't want to show off their wealth? Today, the only time we probably see a chariot is when someone wins a horse race. But back then, chariots were used for everything from racing to hunting wild animals. That's right, children in ancient Rome hunted wild animals using chariots. You may think that's insane, but this was a normal sight in the Colosseum. The bloodthirsty Romans loved nothing more than watching men hunt wild animals. Sometimes these hunts got pretty intense, and it's been reported that sometimes the animals fought back against the hunters. But if the hunter was a child, the animal would almost always win. There's no denying it. Kids love to throw tantrums. This is especially true if they don't get their way. But one thing you should never do is throw a tantrum in ancient Rome. Back then, parents had zero tolerance for kids throwing tantrums. If a child threw a tantrum, they would be met with a swift smack across the face. And we all know how painful a slap can be. But the Romans took things a step further because they believed that a tantrum was a sign of bad character. That's why they would punish their kids in public. By smacking them across the face, this also served as a warning to other children, who may have been thinking about throwing a tantrum themselves. Imagine going to the playground and seeing another kid getting slapped over and over again. Yeah, that would definitely stop you from throwing a tantrum. We all love a good board game. There's something about sitting down with the family and playing Monopoly or Scrabble that brings us joy. It looks like ancient Romans felt the same way, because they too had their own version of Monopoly. They called it Ludus Duodasim Scriptura. We're not quite sure what the game was about, but the name translates to 12 lines. This probably refers to the 12 lines that were on the game board. Unlike our modern-day Monopoly, this game didn't involve buying properties and collecting rent. Instead, the goal of the game was to reach the center of the board before anyone else. To move around the board, players had to roll dice and toss special sticks. Kind of sounds like a combination of Monopoly and Snakes and Ladders. Now, that's a fun game. It's no secret that ancient Rome was dangerous. Even adults had a hard time staying alive. With so much danger lurking around every corner, it's no surprise that Roman children found ways to have fun by playing with weapons. One of the most common weapons that kids would use as toys were swords. These swords were usually given to them by their fathers, who were soldiers in the Roman army. Kids would run around the house pretending to be fierce warriors. Of course, these games often ended in disaster. Many a parent came home to find their house destroyed from their kids' swordplay. As you can imagine, letting kids run around the house with swords isn't the safest idea. But somehow the houses still stood. When you visit a zoo today, you'll see signs telling you not to feed the animals. This is because when humans feed wild animals, it makes them lose their natural instincts. Eventually, they become dependent on humans for food. This wouldn't be such a big deal if the animal was a vegetarian. However, many animals in zoos are carnivorous. When they lose their natural instincts, they can become very dangerous. Well, it looks like ancient Romans didn't get the memo, because they too kept wild animals as pets. But unlike the zoo, Romans kept their wild animals in the home. That's right. Kids in ancient Rome would play with poisonous snakes and even crocodiles as pets. Can you imagine walking into your living room and finding your kid playing with a crocodile? In ancient Rome, kids would play a game similar to hide and seek, except it was much more dangerous. The game was called peplus, and it involved hiding behind a large piece of cloth. This piece of cloth was called a peplus, and it was usually worn by married women. The game started with one person counting to 30, while the other players hid behind the peplus. Then everyone would run out from behind the peplus and try to tag the person who was counting. If you were tagged, then you became the new counter. It sounds fun, right? Well, until someone got hurt. Because the peplus were so large, it was hard to tell who was hiding behind it. This led to many accidents, as people would often run out and bump into each other. Board games aren't the only type of game that Roman kids enjoyed. They also had their own version of red light, green light. They called it lupus and taberna. It involved a group of kids standing in a circle, while one kid was in the middle. The kid in the middle would pretend to be a wolf, and the other kids would pretend to be goats. The wolf would then say either wolf or goat. If he said wolf, then all the other kids would need to run away. If he said goat, then the other kids needed to freeze. Anyone who didn't freeze would be eliminated from the game. Now for our last game. It may come as a shock, but ancient Roman kids played with knives. Knives aren't exactly known for being child-friendly, but this didn't stop Roman kids from playing with them. It may seem like these kids were just asking for trouble, but their game was actually pretty simple. They would throw knives at a wall and try to stick them in between the cracks. This game required skill and precision, and was considered a fun way to pass the time. It also helped kids develop their hand-eye coordination. Now it's time to hear from you. Which of these games would you have the most fun playing? Let us know in the comments. And before you go, make sure to give this video a like.